Hi, and welcome to Power of 10, a podcast about design operating at many levels, zooming out from thoughtful detail through to organisational transformation and on to changes in society and the world. My name is Andy Polaine. I'm a service design and innovation consultant, design leadership coach, educator, and writer. My guest today is my friend and ex-colleague Joff Outlaw, Managing Director of DesignIt for Australia and New Zealand, having taken over from Katja Forbes, who was on the show a few months ago. Joff has led design and consulting teams across the UK and Australia, with project work spanning across all industry verticals. He has a passion for design, CX consulting, and building successful and happy teams. Joff's key focus is helping clients through the sales process, which means taking the time to truly understand an organisation's short-term and long-term goals. Joff, welcome to Power of 10.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well. Have you eaten any good sourdough recently?
Well, you know that's not the case. You know that I'm the only person in the whole design industry that's not a fan of sourdough. I actually told my new team that recently, and I think I lost them straight away.
Yeah, I think you might have done. You know, as someone who bakes sourdough, I send you photos occasionally. I feel quite offended. What is wrong with sourdough, Joff?
It's not so much the bread itself. It's the monopoly that it's got over every cafe in Sydney. So, for example, the best breakfast in the world, in my opinion, is Eggs Benedict. And Eggs Benedict should be served on a toasted English muffin. But you can't get that anymore. In every cafe, it's sourdough. And that disappoints me, upsets me. I think sourdough with a bowl of soup's fine. I've just got a problem with how it's taken over. That's my main issue.
You'll be amused to know that I cut my lip on my own sourdough crust the other day. So.
Yeah, you would do. It's quite a vicious bread.
You're more of a kind of, soft toast bread kind of guy.
I'm more of a soft farmhouse. Yeah, Hovis, yeah.
It's the northern roots, right?
It must be. I haven't got the evolution of gums to deal with sourdough.
I don't know how we segue from sourdough into your role, but so you've just taken on this new role. You just, upset your team by your sourdough mutiny. What is your new role, and what are your plans?
I'm not sure yet. It's come very suddenly. So this is my second role in a year, which is not ideal because there's a lot of mental toil in starting a new role, as you'll know. So I started the year, having left Accenture after 5 years and joined Wipro, and was just getting settled there. And then this opportunity came up, and I guess you can't choose when opportunities come up, so I had to take it and wanted to take it. Look, there's a few issues that I want to get stuck into straight away, but my key ambition really is to make sure that DesignIt's recognised in the region. Obviously, we've got a really impressive global heritage, do some fantastic work across Europe in particular, and the US. So yeah, we need to get going in Australia. Only the expats know who we are here. So yeah, that's the aim, to grow the brand and do work that matters, and hopefully the team will be proud to be part of it, however long it goes and however big we get.
Great. Now you and I we've been, so for people who don't know, Joff and I have worked together at Fjord in Sydney and across Australia and New Zealand. And often I was going to say sort of straight man, funny man, but I think you were the funny man and I was the straight man in those sort of client pitches and client engagements. Is that fair to say?
I don't know about that. So some of your metaphors are pretty legendary.
Yeah, okay. I tend to have quite a lot of dad jokes, and but I think it's probably pushing it to say that I was the funny one. We've talked a lot though in over coffees and all sorts of places around what's known as client engagement, right? What's certainly known in consulting as client engagement, and understanding where clients are coming from, understanding how to engage with their problems. But just before we're recording, you said I want to talk about sales, and I want to talk about why sales is a dirty word. Why is sales a dirty word in your view? Or at least, why do you hear that it's a dirty word from designers?
Because you're asking for money, and that's seen as a bit uncouth, maybe. I don't know. It's
why is that uncouth? What's been your experience?
Well, I think I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I think you can go back to ancient times and market times and dodgy salesmen and the mistrust between the buyer and the seller. So there's always been instances, and there always will be instances of bad sales processes, and the customer not getting what they want or what they thought they would get. So it's never, as a kind of craft, I think it can be very good or very bad, and therefore the reputation overall ends up somewhat tainted, and sales becomes a kind of slightly I won't say dark profession, but potentially not a noble profession. Whereas I've always really, really enjoyed it and always been motivated by it. And it's only as I've got older that I've really embraced it. And I'm proud to tell people that, obviously I'm a managing director and I've got many hats that I wear, but sales is the one that I always say that's my strength. That's what I do really well. But yeah, even when I have people, starting out and they kind of say it in hushed tones, like, oh, I'm interested in sales. And I'm like, great. Well, let's talk about that. It's almost seen as the, profession that you don't really want to do and you fall back on because it's a way to make a living. But no, I think if it's done right, it is a noble profession and it's a very worthy one.
I mean, obviously, without it, you don't have a business, right? And you don't get to do the work you want to do. I've actually often said that, really good salespeople are the kind of people who you wouldn't actually want to be friends with, which is not the case in your case. So there's some kind of magic source there. I think you talk very empathetically about clients, and I've heard you, really try and understand, I'd say apply the same kind of empathy that designers do to the end customer and the end user, upwards, if you like, to the stakeholders and to the clients. What is it that you're looking for when you're trying to make a sale, trying to win business, trying to grow the business? That's the sort of baseline of what you're doing. But there's the way in which you go about this that I think is probably a bit of a mystery to some designers and or people, in the sort of creative professions. What is it you're trying to do?
There's a lot in that. There's a few things that you said actually that I think is possibly why the sales process is sometimes misinterpreted or misunderstood. So you said, win or lose. Hey, beat the competition a lot, right? So there's a lot of sporting lingo that's used in sales, and it's this kind of competitive, macho, going into battle type of thing. Whereas actually, I never treat sales as a sport or a competition. Obviously, it's great to, win new clients and work on new problems, but I think if you treat it as more of a puzzle, it becomes a bit more interesting. So rather than as a game, think of it more as a puzzle. And what you're trying to do is understand, well, what is the client's problem? And sometimes they don't know.
Yeah. How
important is that problem? Can we help with that problem? Do we want to help with that problem as well? Which often comes in, particularly in the design industry. And if you treat it from that perspective, then I think the sales process has a lot in common with the design process, because you're going in to try and discover what's what. So that's why I love it. I love those conversations with clients. It's one of my favourite things when a client says, oh, I've got a problem, or I think I might have a problem. It's good. That's great. Love those conversations.
How often does that happen? Because my experience is a lot of clients come in with I've got a solution that needs being designed. I've got a thing. Here's what I need done. Are you the people to do it, rather than coming with a problem? How do you kind of steer that conversation back to what's the actual problem space?
Are you suggesting maybe the brief might be, we need a new website, something like that?
I mean, typically that's what it, how that comes out. We need that, or we need a chatbot, or we need a drone, whatever the kind of latest kind of tech is. Yeah, I am. And I've always kind of felt that a long time ago in my career, there was a guy from I think like an insurance company or came into the design studio and said some sort of naive things around design, I think, in terms of kind of what he thought the solution was and stuff. And afterwards, all the sort of designers were kind of laughing about this suit who came in and how we need to educate him and stuff. And my then creative director really kind of picked us up on it and said, it's just really arrogant what you're saying. If I was to drop you in your jeans and your t-shirts and your scruffy trainers into the middle of a kind of the boardroom of a insurance company, you would feel absolutely out of place. And of course you're trying to say something. And so I think a lot of those briefs come in with a solution built in, partly because people feel that that's what they should do. Because otherwise, they're coming in completely naive. And the second thing is maybe because they're worried they're going to get ripped off. Yeah.
So what it's about is normally not what it's about, right? So if they're coming in saying, let's keep it simple, or we need a new website, well, why? Like, why do you need a new website? Are you, is it just purely because you don't like the way it looks? Is it just about look and feel? And if that's the case, then do we really want to take that on as a strategic design firm? There's probably other people I'd recommend who do a great job at just uplifting the branding. Is it because they need to, for the first time start selling things online. If you've got a client like that, that causes all different challenges and a different conversation. Is it because they want to connect their in-store experience more to the online experience and try and create a completely differentiated, product service? You start asking questions like that and you get to the heart of what they're actually trying to do. And by asking those questions, you're showing that you really care, because it's a lot easier to just go, okay, we're the best company ever at websites. Here's 10 we've done. If you go with anyone else, you're stupid. And here's the price. We'll give you a special discount if you sign today. Right, that's how you break trust. So,
it just, the way you said that, I feel like you've just sold me a car, Joff.
Sold your website.
The wheels are going to fall off when I drive away.
Yeah, exactly. So the more you take the time to investigate, the more trust you build. And what's the old saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is if the client doesn't want to tell you anything, all right, then they either already know who they're going with and they're not really interested in you and you're making up the numbers, or they've no idea what they're doing at all, in which case the project will never happen. So by being investigative, you're actually qualifying as well to see, is this someone, is this an organisation you want to work with? Is this how you want to spend your time? Which is just as important, because good salespeople are just people who are good at qualifying. You've only got the same hours in the day as everyone else. So how you choose to spend your time, you have to be very careful with that. And if you're not good at qualification, you'll spend all your time chasing the wrong deals, and you have to get a new profession, right? So investigation is the most important bit of any sale.
I know you've got a very good radar for this, a very good nose for kind of that investigation. To sort of watch you in action, as it were, it seems quite instinctual. I'm interested to know how you kind of develop that nose, and whether you have a kind of process that you could say, this is my process, or whether it's more something you've learned over time.
Well, Andy, I'm not a huge process guy. It's a bit of a weakness of mine. There's lots of qualification frameworks and, too many to mention. And most of them fail as well because of that kind of instinct, that, as you say, the nose for it. So there's a bit of an art and a science to it. You've got to kind of understand those cues, but you've almost have got to seen it before as well. Because if you're going through a qualification process and you're asking the questions just to try and get answers so you can tick a box and then start work on the proposal, you're not really qualifying properly. So qualification frameworks can give you a steer in the right direction, but then it's the same with, look, I'll bring the analogy back to research. You could give anyone a discussion guide, right? It doesn't make them a good researcher. It's the same thing when it comes to qualification. You've got to really try and get a sense for what the client's trying to do. How important is it? Do you really understand the issues? Are the issues quantifiable? I mean, there's so much in this, but sometimes a client can tell you the problems, but when you say, oh, why is it a problem? They go, I don't know. And then you suddenly realise it's never going to get funded, because there's no business outcomes tied to what they're trying to do. They're just leading you on a merry dance. So there's a lot in it. I think a qualification framework can help, but then you've got to go get the experience. You've got to go and get burnt and go, lose that time and know what it feels like to spend months on a deal that's never going to happen. And before you really kind of can have a nose for it, as you would say.
And what was your trial by fire in that sense? Was there a moment where you kind of had a click, or was it a gradual sort of accretion of experience over time?
Oh no, there was no eureka moment. I wish there was. No, it was years and years of dejection. Yeah, no, it's the same as anything, Andy. It's just experience, and you learn, and you get a little bit better every day, right? And then it becomes a bit easier.
So I've got a slight theory, at least it may, I think I'm just talking about me, but I think there is, you said dejection, but it also made me think of rejection. There's quite a lot of, that's part and parcel of that process. That's quite hard kind of personally to take sometimes. How have you dealt with that aspect of selling design work?
How have I dealt with the rejection? It's not that important in the grand scheme.
Okay.
In the grand scheme of things, Andy, is the way I see it.
I don't care is the answer to that question, is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, you want to win interesting work for the team, and I've felt enormous pride when we've, certain projects, and I think potentially certain projects we've worked on together where, you bring that piece of work in at the studio and everyone's super excited about it. And then you look at the teams working on it for months and you see the end result and you feel a sense of pride. But when you lose one, I mean, it's part and parcel of the nature of the work. You can't win them all. Like it's impossible. So the main thing is just, if you're going to lose, just lose quickly. Like the worst is the kind of the maybe that goes on forever. When you've got and that's normally means you've done something wrong in qualification. But when you've got a client who drags it on for months and months and months, that's the worst. But I've got no problem if if you've got an opportunity and a month later you get told it's a no, that's great. Move on, go on the next one.
So it's pretty common, at least certainly in my coaching work and also in my sort of consulting work, I hear designers moan about clients and stakeholders as well. How can stakeholders be a better buyer of design?
How can stakeholders be a better I don't think that's their job.
Okay.
That's our job, right? So they're not design professionals and they're hiring us because we are.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you get different levels of sophistication and understanding. I mean, it's very helpful if you get a client that really knows their stuff, although sometimes that can be a bad thing as well. But yeah, I would say it's our job. I know where your questions are, and I hear it a lot working with the team where, it's always the client doesn't get it and, the client doesn't know what they've signed up for. That to me means that we're not doing a good enough job either in the sales process to scope it properly or during the project in terms of project management, comms and communication. Now, look, you're always going to have those instances where it just doesn't work out. But, if you get the sales process right, and look, a reason to qualify out could be that the client just isn't a good fit because of that. Like they're just too immature. Their expectations are too outlandish. Why would you put yourself through it? The budget's not right. There are all reasons why you don't go into that relationship. But if you decide to go into it, then, we should be helping them look good. That's our job, right?
That's, I guess, what I'm talking about in terms of, it doesn't necessarily have to be experts in design. Like, they don't necessarily have to know about design, I guess I'm saying. But in fact, maybe there's obviously more than one client, but at least there's at least two camps of, I've got this problem and I think design might be the solution or the thing I need. And then I've done this a lot, and this is kind of what I'm after. For the people for whom, the client, it might be their first time where it's been a design heavy kind of project. Design may have been a kind of sort of ancillary decorative service for them up until now, or something they kind of brought on. You talked about, say, sort of branding and those kinds of things. But for something that's maybe more, change led, or it's got a kind of heavy CX component in it, and they are going much more heavily design supported. I'm struggling not to say design led because I don't actually really want to say that, but it is sort of heavily design supported. It's often, the first time they've really engaged in that way. And I think that it is often a mismatch of expectations. There is often a mismatch or a sort of misunderstanding or misaligned kind of mental models of what this could be. And I've often kind of felt like those clients are actually sort of struggling to buy the thing they actually need. And that's what I meant by how might they be sort of better stakeholders.
As we both know, it can be very hard because we don't always know the answer. We have to go through the process to get the answer right. So when we talk about particularly if it's a strategic kind of service design project, we can explain the process and the client will often say, well, what does that look like then? And it's the old consulting answer, well, it depends.
What does the outcome look like?
Yeah, what do the outputs look like? And you can show examples, but then that can be dangerous because then suddenly you're tied into doing a journey map again when it might not be the right answer. I think the only answer I've got to that is that you need a project manager that is equal to the sales team, so that is working, or a project lead, doesn't have to be a project manager, but is managing those expectations all the way through. Regular check-ins, here's what we are, here's what we found, early sketches, this is what we think we're going to do, what do you think? And look, part of the project setup is how, are you going to be invested in this project to help us through? Because normally when design projects go wrong, it's because you've got a disengaged stakeholder who kind of just wants to throw it over the fence. That's often a sign that it's going to go badly, because at some point they're going to get engaged and they're going to go, oh, hold on, this isn't what I was thinking. And we never captured what they were thinking because it's 3 weeks down the line and we've already started sketching out a particular concept or a service vision or whatever. I think you need a good project lead to kind of counterbalance the sales team. But I also don't think the sales team should disappear either. Projects tend to go better when the sales lead is there for the client as kind of on the balcony saying, look, you can come and chat to me if something's not going as you'd expect. Clients get pretty upset if the sales guy comes in, does the dance, and then he's gone as soon as the contract's signed. So you need that kind of guy on the balcony as well, just to provide a bit of perspective and, calm the client down if they get a bit anxious.
This is the person they first formed the relationship with and trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you need that objectivity. You need someone outside of the project just to provide a bit of, provide that objective view of what's going on and give the client a bit of comfort.
So, the selling is only the kind of first part of it. And you've just talked about that kind of project manager or project lead who's kind of shepherding it through, which feels in a way, lots of sort of mini sales points, actually. Kind of saying, this is where we're at, what do you think of this? This is where, literally to say, are you still buying this, of what we're doing here? But there's this sort of other end, which I've seen a lot of, and you and I have experienced, teams get burnt out on, which is that disconnect between the people who sell the project and what the experience of actually doing that project was. Because selling the project is also involved, as part of it is also scoping it and saying, we need this many people for this much time, this is what we're going to achieve. And if that feedback loop doesn't happen at the other end, and go, do you know what? We actually needed 2 extra weeks on that project or another 3 people because that was a kind of complete nightmare and we were all kind of frazzled and burnt out. That quite often that feedback loop sort of doesn't seem to happen so often.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's absolutely essential. You need to have that retro and the sales. I mean, look, the sales lead should be working with as I've said, the delivery lead in some capacity all the way through. And that retro needs to happen. You need to, just same way as a client, you need to avoid the us and them, which can easily happen, right? When things get tough, the delivery team the easiest thing for the delivery team to say is, it's the sales team's fault. The easiest thing to do. Right. Just blame the scope of the project.
Because it is. It's all your fault.
And the easiest thing for the sales, the easiest thing for the sales guy to do is go, delivery messed it up, I did my bit.
Right.
So you need to kind of watch out for that because it doesn't serve anyone's purpose, the company's purpose long term, or the client's. So I agree with you. The retro is really important, and a good, honest retro where everyone can air what went well, what went wrong, and learn. And look, in terms of the sales process, it's not it shouldn't be an isolated team working on that either. The design team should be providing inputs. The challenge that you often have, as you well know, in agency land or in a consultancy is that it's very hard to predict who's going to be available to work on the project whenever the sale may happen. So a design director might work with the sales team to scope it, but that might not be the same design director leading the project when the client finally signs it 3 months down the line. And so the team have to get comfortable with that as well and say, well, look, I haven't necessarily been involved in scoping this, but I trust my teammate who has, and, we'll approach it with a positive mindset to try and make it work. Because everyone would do things differently. It's not we're dealing with complex problems, so there's never kind of one single answer in terms of solving that.
Let's talk about procurement.
Oh, gosh.
It was lovely to see your face. I wish people could have seen your face. I give procurement a beating quite often in sort of writing and talking and presenting and things because on the one hand I feel like, and I always feel very sorry for anyone's in procurement because I feel like I'm being very nasty to those people, but I actually think of it more systemically in the sense of you've got this kind of strange setup where this department exists in order to ostensibly save a company money and stop them getting ripped off. And yet it seems to function to entirely waste money and end up, encouraging people to sort of hoodwink them in order to get through it. And yet they're only doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is to kind of maintain the status quo. Right?
Yes. Yeah, procurement. My next door neighbour works in procurement, actually. I feel sorry for him. No, he's... look, there's a lot of... Let's not completely bash the whole profession. I think there's some very good skills that you need in procurement that are useful in lots of areas of business. So procurement people are normally very good at negotiation, very good at kind of gathering requirements, and you should be good communicators as well. So there is some good skills within that profession. Is the question how I deal with procurement, my strategies for working with procurement? Is that what you'd like to know?
It's slightly. I mean, I guess that's what I'd say is procurement seems to be function well in the way you've just described it for things that are of a known quantity. So if you're buying, boxes of Sharpies or desks or office space or whatever, where we know this thing is a thing, and we can compare it to other exactly the same things on the market, and therefore negotiate a deal. It seems kind of absurd to try and negotiate a deal on something where nobody actually really knows what the middle of the project and you might know what the desired outcomes are, but those are different from outputs, right? So, and I think procurement really actually is not set up to procure the kind of work that we do.
Creative services or complex services. Yeah, no, I'd definitely say there's some truth in that. I think the key thing here is that the procurement team obviously don't write the briefs, right? They're not kind of sat at the desk going, you know what we need to do? We need to try and improve our banking experience for the new generation of digital natives or whatever. It's a terrible brief, but you get the idea. They're obviously getting their briefs from their stakeholders. So our job is really to influence those stakeholders, be involved in ideally you want to always avoid procurement, as you kind of hinted at earlier. Mm-hmm. But where it becomes too big, procurement normally get involved. And at that point, you need to have done the work before the RFP comes out. So if you're responding to an RFP that you didn't know about, good luck with that.
All right, okay. Let's talk about that whole process. So RFP, and there's RFIs, aren't there as well? And there's a
RFI.
Yeah. So
yeah,
let's
RFI.
de-acronym them. What are these strange things, Joff, for those who down the other end of the design process who have never heard of these things?
And you're sure your listeners want to hear about these things?
Well, they might. They can always skip. They can always fast forward.
Yeah. Okay. So very quickly, so you have an EOI. An EOI is the worst of all. That's an expression of interest. That basically translates as we just want some information off you to find out things what we might not know about, and with no commitment to buy anything off you.
Sounds great.
An RFI, yeah. An RFI is a request for information. Normally, a request for information is the precursor to an RFP. So you normally would consider doing that if you knew with good faith that it was going on to something bigger and you wanted to make sure you were down selected for the RFP. And then the RFP is obviously the request for a proposal. That's where the real work starts. That's where you get the 30-page PDF and you lose a few weeks of your life responding to try and win that big business. Often in government, of course, as well. Often in government.
Yeah. Which disadvantages smaller agencies sometimes, right? Because it does require someone who's just constantly across those very arcane kind of places where those things appear, for starters, and secondly, is able to plough the time into going through, as our previous Accenture colleagues would call answering the exam question, right? Which is literally to sort of just go through and have we ticked all the boxes in this RFP.
Well, those organisations are trained to respond, right? So any of your big, the big four or Accenture's the big five, they're trained, they're match ready to respond to these RFPs. So seeing all the questions before, they have all the content ready. As a small agency, most of those RFPs anyway, you wouldn't even be able to take the risk to take on the project, because if it went south, you could use up your whole team as well. So would you take that risk to have all your eggs in one basket? The government's tried to do some things around that in Australia, obviously, with the digital marketplace. I don't know if you were involved in that.
I was at the beginning. Yeah.
So we were involved in. So we created that to try and make it easier for smaller businesses. But look, RFPs, procurement, not a lot of fun, but can be. It's the necessary evil. These tend to be the market changing opportunities, the ones that you really want to work on, and that's why procurement are involved, because there's big dollars involved. So they want to make sure that they're following a due process to make sure that they feel confident they're getting the right value from what they're putting out there. The main advice I've got is to do the pre-work. Make sure you're having the right conversations and with the right stakeholders and finding out about the problems so that the RFP isn't a surprise to you. So many companies respond to RFPs with no relationships They don't know anyone in the government organisation or the financial institution or whatever sector it may be. And they respond because the opportunity is so big. And they get excited about the potential of winning. But it's a lottery ticket. You've got and everyone's got one story. Oh, we didn't know anyone and we still won it. But then that's a curse in itself, because all that does then is waste the next 20 years of your life where you keep going after them and losing.
So what has been your, obviously you can't name names, but give me an example of just the thing to avoid. What's been a kind of terrible sales and client engagement experience you've had? And maybe what was the lesson learned? Just get out your big book.
I wouldn't say a terrible, I had a lot of knocks coming through in terms of going to meetings where I thought I was ready to go on my own. This is, decades ago, and then turning up and going, oh, I've got nothing to say, actually. Should have brought someone who knows what they're talking about. And the meeting lasts like 15 minutes and you're like, all right, I'm going to get the train back to Ipswich now. Sorry about that. That's a bit awkward. But the ones that, and most of the things, I always treat this whole profession with a sense of humour and, as a bit of fun. I enjoy it. But there's a couple where sometimes, now and again, they'll creep back in and I'll go, we should have done that work. We should have done that project. One in particular, which you'll know of, which is when we had to fly all the way to New York to pitch for it from Sydney, which isn't a short flight. It was Saturday for about 3 days, I think. And we should have won it. We should have won it, and we didn't. And we didn't, looking back and thinking about it, we didn't because we weren't set as a team going into it. So we pulled in so many different people, and they were all the right people. And we were the best company to do the work. And I still believe that to this day. And this is going back about 4 or 5 years now. But we didn't win it because we weren't formed as a team. We hadn't sold something together as a team. We hadn't yet delivered something as this group of individuals going to do this presentation to some very senior people. And it showed, because the process was so thorough, it eked its way out. So that was kind of an important one, because what we should have done is just stuck with the people that we knew that, they might not have been the most senior, or as senior rather, but we would have had a better chemistry and we'd have been able to ad-lib off each other and it'd have come across as more authentic. So that one hurts, because we should have got that. I mean, I don't mind losing, I don't mind not winning a deal or losing a deal if sometimes you go, well, I'm not sure we were right for the client, I'm not sure we had the right services, or it'd have been a bit of a stretch for us, or did we really, there's lots of reasons you can rationalise a loss. That one I couldn't. That one I was like, we were definitely the right company to do it. So it killed me a bit.
We were robbed.
Yeah.
So you don't, as long as the other team kind of played better, then it's okay. But when it's just like a kind of...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and you could end up being on the other side. It's a small industry, and, it's just good to see companies spending good money on design, right? And important areas, so... No, it's all positive.
Did you hear my attempt there to try and talk football to you?
You did, yeah. I decided to ignore it.
So soccer to our American friends. Do you still play? Joff still claims he could have been, played for some Premier League team. Is that still the case?
It depends. It depends if I've had more than 2 beers. Normally, if I've had more than 2 beers, I could have captain England. But, no, I still play for as long as my hamstrings last. Normally it's about 5 games, and then I'm out for the rest of the season.
It's a young man's game, that's for sure. And it was, when I was a young man, it was not my game either. So it was never my game. I was put in goal at school playing soccer because I was rubbish. And then when the ball came towards me, I'd just sort of go, ah! and it would go through.
You'd be my sort of goalkeeper.
I'm always fascinated by goalkeepers, because I think when you see a good one, there's a level of commitment, even if it's in the wrong direction, particularly with penalties. There's a level of commitment to the dive towards the, where they think it's going to be, that you have to have, that I don't. I flinch away. I'm too dithering of kind of, I don't know which direction to go in.
The psychology of goalkeepers, they're always the craziest person on the team. Goalkeepers, strange breed.
Yeah, yes. Well, they've also got big hands too. I don't know where that leaves us. Hey, so
I
that
know
was
where
that was a. I knew we would end up laughing a lot. That was an interesting aside, but I was hoping it might go somewhere. For me, I think though the commitment to the kind of direction thing was where I was going with that. I think is quite important to have some kind of commitment to direction, and then okay, we weren't the right fit, or we're not the right person to you. Because I think I've seen where for me I've seen sort of sales go wrong, at least from this perspective of being then part of the team who are having to deliver on the promise, is to bend yourselves out of shape in order to try and satisfy the ask instead of having the guts to say no. So you talked earlier about we should things I wish I'd gone for and so forth. My experience, and I'm interested if it's yours, is that the things you say no to are much more important. And I wonder if you've had some examples of things you're glad you said no to, or whether you even agree with that.
Oh, yeah. No, of course I agree with that. If you try and stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, well, it's normally hard to sell in that way anyway, because, you're kind of faking it a little bit, and that normally comes out in the wash. What's even worse though sometimes is when you win and you're kind of stretching your capabilities somewhat. I mean,
in a bad way.
I think we've been talking about sales a lot as if it's this separate entity within the entity. So good sales is good delivery, it's good work, it's good business, it's all connected. So the sales process doesn't stop if you get the deal signed. If the project then ends up running at a loss because you had no idea what you were talking about, or you sold the wrong thing, then that's not a good sale. Like, that's a disaster, right? And I've seen many instances of that where, projects completely undersold. And it's terrible for the delivery team. It's terrible for the client because it's just been set up to fail. And no good salesperson would ever feel good about that. They would never go, oh, well, that's okay. I got those things on my number. You should always care about, well, did it lead to the great outcome, which you can then talk about. That's what good salespeople talk about. They talk about the good outcomes. They don't talk about the good sale, because that's largely irrelevant.
Although there's plenty of sort of high-fiving of the big sale in agency land, right?
Yeah, I'd hope less so in when I say the design, the more strategic design, UX kind of. I think we're a little bit more. Salespeople tend to be a bit more integrated, hopefully, with the teams, and there's less egos. But yeah, I guess so in marketing and advertising land, that has been traditionally a bit macho. But yeah, I don't subscribe to that kind of sales environment. That's not something I would work within.
It's sometimes triggered by the kind of incentives and KPIs that the sales teams get set, which is about volume rather than outcomes. Right?
Yeah. I remember a good friend of mine once, when he left university, ended up at Foxtons, and I think he aged about 50 years in 9 months, and it's just a horrific.
So for people who don't know, Foxtons is a real estate agency that massively expanded in England kind of very quickly.
Yeah. It was very, very boiler room type sales environment, ringing of the bell,
right?
That kind of thing, handing out cash on a Friday, real kind of.
Glengarry and Glen Ross. Is it? That's that film. Always
Glengarry, Glen Ross. Yeah. Always be closing.
Always be closing. Yeah. If anyone's interested in like a horrific example of that environment, watch that film. It's a sort of weird kind of cult classic.
That's right.
So a lot of designers, are interested in as they become more senior, and certainly by default as they get into leadership roles, end up taking more of a role in the sales process. And some want to for that very reason of like, I'm fed up of working on projects that have been scoped wrongly or whatever. What's your you've had a few designers go through that process and work with you. What's your advice to them? What do you think is the sort of biggest learning they have to?
The biggest learning by the time they've got to that stage, if you're talking about the more senior kind of design directors and senior service designers, senior designers, they already have the knowledge. Right, they've got the knowledge of their craft, so they should take comfort in that. They should take comfort that they know what they're talking about. And if you want to build trust with a client, you've got to have good intent. So you've got to be there to want to help them solve a problem, as we discussed earlier. But you've also got to have expertise. So they're going into the room with the expertise. So they should take comfort in that. Now, what they don't need to necessarily have, although it's, they definitely can acquire this skill or learn this skill if they want, but it's the things around negotiation, which can get, a bit combative if done in the wrong way. Pricing, which can be quite administrative, particularly if you work in big companies where it's all about trying to get the margin right. They don't necessarily have to know these things to be involved in the sales process. I think my advice would be that you're there for a reason, which is to bring in your expertise and your knowledge. Now, if you want to get more into the business mechanics of things, then great. I mean, happy days. I think every salesperson would love it if a design director wanted to have conversations around margin and help with that stuff. But yeah, take confidence in what you know. I mean, that's your security blanket. You know your stuff, right?
Yeah, although I tend to think that designers weirdly talk about design too much to clients sometimes. in that, we talk about here's all the work we've done and here's all the kind of things, either at the end of a project or in the middle of the project of, so we interviewed these people, and there's all these people, and we tried this and that didn't work. We tried this and this didn't work, and we tried that and this didn't work. And then the client's like, I don't care. Well, I don't know now. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at now. Or, during I'm guilty of this. You called me the professor for that very reason, but talk, long about process and the design process and not so much about outcomes. So that's...
Well, I enjoyed your monologue, Andy, but yeah, I understand the...
That's why you listen to the podcast.
I understand the point. Yeah. Look, that's the job of the sales director or the commercial director, to do proper rehearsals, to coach. These are the key points. This is what your role is. Does it always work out perfectly? Of course not. You're always going to get occasions where maybe someone gets nervous, just goes into verbal diarrhea. Do you lose a sale because of that? Probably not. Providing you still can cover everything and you still get to the detail in the project, I think clients sometimes think, okay, well, he obviously knows his stuff. He was a bit nervous during the sales process. They understand that. They're people too, obviously. So yeah, look, rehearsals help, and the sales director should be there to coach you that. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, right? Mm. So yeah, it's not. I never kind of freak out if a designer's, going off on one. I kind of think it's part of the charm sometimes, but unless it just completely takes over and you lose. But then then as a sales director, you have to interject. Right. You have to take control back, right?
So, I mean, rehearsal is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because there's a sort of golden sort of middle to that. Because if you just go in and wing it, which is the kind of thing you and I would have never done, it can look like you're just going in and winging it. But if you sort of over-rehearse, it can just come off too polished and actually a little inhumane and stiff, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely a balance. And never do a rehearsal on the day of the presentation. That's another mistake I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah, never do that because any feedback you get at that point, two things normally happen. You won't remember it, in which case, why bother with the last minute rehearsal? Mm. Or the second thing is you try and fit it in, get your words wrong because it's different to what you were going to say. So by the time the morning comes of the big pitch, you've done everything you can. Just go and enjoy it. Don't try and cram in some last minute messaging or last minute rehearsals.
Because your brain's just kind of rattle. You just don't say elephant, don't say elephant.
Yeah, exactly. It's not helpful. It's normally someone very senior in the organisation that suddenly has a nervous reaction and suddenly wants you all in a room, with like 15 minutes to go.
With a huddle. Yeah, like a rugby team. Everyone, be professional. Really? Okay. Well, listen, Joff, we're coming up for time. As you know, the podcast is named after this Ray and Charles Eames film about the relative size of things in the universe. And my final question is always, what small thing is overlooked that has an outsized effect on the world?
It's the most difficult question of the whole podcast, isn't it? I feel like everyone always struggles with it. An easy answer would obviously go back to sourdough and just remove its influence from all the cafes that's in there. Still keep it around, but just, get it back in its place. I don't know if this outweighs its impact. I'm going with it anyway because it has a big impact, but I really don't like cars. I don't like driving. I learned to drive very late because I've always lived in cities, and it was only when I moved to Australia about, 8 years ago now, that I realised I had to drive because, well, Australia's not as connected.
Well, hang on, you only learned to drive 8 years ago?
Yeah. So I learned to drive in my 30s, yeah. And that might be why I hate driving, because it's something that I've had to pick up late. But yeah, even when I was younger, I never wanted to do it. I think it's a waste of time. It's dangerous. It's not good for the planet. Yeah, it just feels like it hasn't moved on at all. I mean, the cars are still broadly the same as they were back in the 20s or 30s. So just think we need something better. I feel like we could have used the last 2 years all locked in our homes to just redesign all the roads, and we could have come out with something like the Jetsons or something much better. I don't know. But cars, get rid of them.
Just all the roads have turned into kind of trams and trains and sort of and smart things, and we're just so we're going to lock you away for 2 years, and then when you come out, it's like that Woody Allen film where he kind of wakes up in the future.
Or you just go into like a slide, like a water slide, but without water. It could be water in Sydney. It's often quite hot here, and it just takes you where you want to go. But it's not fast and exhilarating, because I don't like that either, but just nice and relaxing, and you can read instead of kind of being behind the wheel thinking, is someone going to smash into me? And road rage as well. Why does everyone get so angry in their cars? It's almost like the car acts as a shelter where it's like, oh, now I can just be really rude and swear at you. And it's only because of the pane of glass. So, I don't know, cars, get rid of them.
Well, cars are like the sort of physical social media, right? Where you can kind of, you're hiding in this little bubble, and you can, it's why people pick their nose in their cars and stuff and all sorts of things. But even though they're actually in a glass box, and they're allowed to kind of act in ways, or they give themselves permission to act in ways that they wouldn't if they were actually face to face. So, yeah. Maybe cars need like eyes or something. Maybe that would just change things. If like the cars have eyes, and so they were sort of frowning or looking upset and stuff.
Are you talking about Herbie?
I think I am.
Herbie goes bananas.
Herbie didn't have eyes, did Herbie? Herbie just kind of did wheelies and things. I think I'm talking about cars. I am actually now talking about the Pixar film, I think.
No, you're right, so wrong. Yeah.
Joff, thank you so much for being my guest on Power of 10.
Absolute pleasure.
Where can people find you online, by the way?
LinkedIn's my preferred medium for everything work related. I'm not huge on social media, actually. But LinkedIn I'm quite active on.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll put the link to LinkedIn and to your new home in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
As I'm sure you're aware, you've been listening to Power of 10. My name is Andy Polaine. You can find me at apolaine on Twitter or polaine.com, where you can find more episodes and sign up for my newsletter, Doctor's Note. If you like the show, please take a moment to give it a rating on iTunes. It really helps others find us. And as always, get in touch if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions for guests. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.